Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game review for Boise State versus Air Force. Yes, the video is coming out a little bit later than normal. I do apologize for that. I am just right now in the middle of transitioning from working nights to working days. So by the time the game ended, I've been up for over 24 hours. Could barely think straight. Was excited. Was exuberant about the win. But I said I'm not going to give my best product if I do this right now. I also am coming down with just a little bit of maybe some allergies or something. So I apologize if I'm coughing occasionally during this video. And obviously not my normal studio space because like most of you probably are, I am visiting family for the Thanksgiving period. So I am outside of my normal studio space. But with that, let's get into the video. We're going to look at the offense, the defense, the special teams. We're going to grade each of these units and see how Boise State did. And then we're also going to look at how Boise State did against my keys to the game. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to dedicate some very specific time to talking about what this means for Spencer Danielson. Is the head coaching search over after this win? Has he solidified himself as the #1 candidate? Should he be the #1 candidate? Or should Boise State still look at other options? I'm going to talk about all of that and, of course, what this win means for Boise State as far as extending their season here through a couple, maybe at least one more game prior to the bowl game. So let's get into the video. Offense, defense, special teams, starting with the offense for Boise State. Overall, a very strong performance. Air Force coming into this game was ranked 4th in the country in total yardage defense, allowing only 276.2 yards per game. Boise State put up 409 yards of total offense, and a lot of that came on the ground game where Air Force was one of the top teams in the country. Again, in the rushing defense, they were only allowing 93.1 yards rushing per game, which was 10th best in the country, and Boise State put up 181 yards rushing, so almost 100 yards plus the average that Air Force was giving up throughout the season. Now, for Boise State's offense, it would have been a more dominant game if not for some mistakes, which we'll talk about here in a second, but overall, Boise State came out and did exactly what I said they needed to. I said they needed to beat Air Force at their own game. Long, extended drives. Keep your defense fresh. Run the ball. Focus on your strength. Don't worry about what Air Force's strengths are, about what they're good at stopping, because at the end of the day, if your strengths don't match up against Air Force's weakness, it doesn't really matter that you've identified the weakness. Focus on what you are good at, and Boise State did that. They ran the two-back system with Halani and Genty, which I really think they found a good groove of mixing in both backs well, using them both to their strengths, and using Green's legs in the running game as well. And Halani had 52 yards rushing and 14 yards receiving, a nice overall game. And Genty looks like he is back to 100% strength, obviously playing last week, but he wasn't on like a limited snap count or anything, but he looked like he was missing just that little edge that Genty always has. Well, this game, it was back. He looked like he had never been touched or injured before. He looked 100%, 107 yards rushing and 118 yards receiving. He had a long touchdown run and a long reception for both of those to put up 2 touchdowns overall on the game and over 200 yards of total offense. So for Boise State overall, I really liked how they came out. They established the running game. They had 2 4 or 6 minute drives, 10 minutes drives combined in their first 3 drives. They had a 4-minute drive on their first one, which ended in a field goal, and then they had a 6-minute drive on their third drive that ended in a touchdown, a beautiful touchdown by Green off of the option to set up using the run game to set up other options for the offense. We saw that consistently in this game. We saw that last week. Bush Hamdan finally free, finally able to conduct the offense exactly as he wants to, and we really started seeing Boise State focus on the running game. While they're not all run, they're still offense, there's still passing yards in here, 228 yards passing. They are focused on that running game, and they're using that to set up other options. They're using the running back room to set up the quarterback run option. They're using their tight ends, which is something you remember 3 or 4 videos ago, maybe three videos ago. One of my keys to the game was focus on your tight ends in the receiving game. You don't have a lot of depth right here at wide receiver. You don't have a lot of experienced wide receivers. You've got some good catching tight ends. Focus on using them in the passing game because you can mix up your formations a lot with the tight ends, and the defense is not going to know what to look at. Because when you throw tight ends out there, they could be out there to block. They could be out there to catch a ball. The wide receivers, if you start loading up with wide receivers, that's a little bit of a heavier indication that you're going to be passing. Boise State in this game really focusing on throwing to the tight ends. And again, using the run game, which the defense has to stop. They have to know that they have to come down and stop that, and opening up opportunities for the tight ends. You had 2 passes to Louder and 2 passes to Smith. Actually, combined between the 2 of them, those 2 tight ends, you had 4 receptions by tight end, which is 1 more catch than any wide receiver receiver combined had in the game. Boise State only had 3 wide receivers with catches. Strawn had 1, Bolt had 1, and Bowens had 1 for 0 yards, a second game in a row with only a 0-yard reception. So really struggling to find a system, a way to work Bowens into this system post Andy Avalos. But the tight ends came alive, and that is something that has always been part of the Boise State way. The tight ends mixing into the offense, and Boise State finally using them effectively, and they have great hands, especially Louder. I saw it last season, towards the end of last year. We knew that Louder was going to be a big guy to step up and fill the gap there for the tight end unit, and he has great hands. There was an amazing pass to the sideline. Yes, Green made some mistakes today, but not all of his passes were bad. He actually started off the game really well. I think he was 6 of 6 before his first pick. And intersprinkled between the mistakes, he also had some good throws. And one of those great throws was a sideline pass to Louder, which was a beautiful throw by Taylor Green to put it right on the sideline where only Louder could get it. And he kept both feet in bounds and made the catch. Incredible catch by him. So 2 receptions for 36 yards. Smith, 2 receptions for 32 yards as well. Really focusing on getting the wide receivers involved. So for offense overall for Boise State, I really liked it. However, they also made mistakes, and the mistakes came through Taylor Green. The blocking scheme was great. The offensive line continues to dominate, which is such a progression from where they started last year, the end of last year, where they thought they were going to come into this season. They've made a huge step forward. The most improved unit for Boise State in the last 3 years. The running game is finally hitting on all cylinders. When Genty's got to go out, Helani comes in. When Helani's got to go out, Genty comes in. You both have 2 starting backs for Boise, for any college football team, 2 premier starting backs in the game, and that is incredibly hard to stop. And Green's decision-making in the run game was really good overall as well, but he's still making mistakes. Second drive of the game, Boise State comes down the field. They're in the red zone. They look like they're going to come up quickly. They've taken all the momentum out of the game. Boise State's defense has started really, really strong, something we're going to talk about here in a second. And then Taylor Green throws to the middle of the field, underthrows the ball to a receiver that was not open in between 2 defenders, and the ball gets picked off. And it's a mistake we've seen from Taylor Green time and time again this season, and that wasn't his only mistake. He made a second one in the second half where he had a lazy throw across his body. That's something else we've seen with Taylor Green, where he kind of doesn't really force the ball in there, throws off his back foot across his body, lazy underthrown ball that was again picked off. And people are upset, and rightfully so. I mean, you don't want to see your starting quarterback making plays like this. But here's the thing. Taylor Green has not progressed at all this season for a reason. Boise State at no point this year has worked on developing Taylor Green. Their answer to Taylor Green struggling this season was to replace him with another quarterback. And that has been the MO under Andy Avalos, previous to him being fired. That was the MO under Andy Avalos going back to Bachmeier. Remember, Bachmeier struggling gets replaced by Taylor Green. Taylor Green struggling gets replaced by Maddox Madsen. Now there's nobody left for them to replace. They're forced to work on Taylor Green, and that's a good thing. They finally are forced to actually hone his skills. Of course, we haven't seen any progression from Taylor Green. Of course, he's making the same mistakes that he made last year, the same mistakes he made at the beginning of this year, because at no point has anybody actually worked on developing him and helping him find ways to recover and get over mistakes throughout the season. The answer has always been, well, there's another quarterback we can throw in. So I am not surprised at all that Taylor Green is continuing to make these mistakes, because he hasn't been, the focus has not been, how can we meld the offense to his strengths, which now the offense actually does meld to his strengths, but it hasn't been this season, meld the offense to his strengths, and how can we help him fix the issues that he has. It's been, okay, you're broken. Let's see how we can use what you do well, and we're going to put somebody else in for the positions that you struggle in, versus trying to strengthen the total picture, which was kind of the whole point of Bush Hamdan coming in here. So now that Andy Avalos is gone, now that Bush Hamdan has the reins, assuming Taylor Green stays, and I mean, that's a big question mark. Who knows what new head coaches are going to look like, what the team's chemistry, what the roster is going to look like coming into next season. Who knows who's going to still be on there? But I 100% expect that if Taylor Green stays, and he is the one that competes for and earns that starting job again coming into next year, which again, it's not a guarantee. Maddox Madsen comes back from injury. He could have a chance to steal that job. Or if Boise State brings in another quarterback in the transfer portal, something like that. But now that Andy Avalos is gone, Bush Hamdan, I think, now has an opportunity to do what he was hired to do. And so we shouldn't be giving up on Taylor Green. right now. We shouldn't. He has so much to offer. He has so much potential. It's just untapped potential with an offensive system this year that hasn't worked to his strengths. Now the offense is actually working to his strength. We're seeing a much better version of Taylor Green, but he's still making the same mistakes because at his heart, he's still a young, underdeveloped, raw quarterback. He needs to be developed. He needs his strength to shine through. And it's going to take a focused offensive staff that is committed to him to do that. And so if he sticks around, I think we'll see a much better, much more honed version of him coming through the rest of the year. But we can expect him to continue to make mistakes like this. High upside, high low, low, whatever that's called. high upside with him, and you also have a very high risk element with him as well. So high risk, high reward type situation. I think the reward is worth it, continuing to work with and develop Taylor Green, and obviously there's no other options right now. But fans have got to be gentle. They've got to be patient with him because, yes, everyone's responsible for their own actions, and he's responsible for his mistakes. But he's also, at the same time, has not been put in a situation to thrive. He's not been put in a situation where he's been taking all the reps this season, in-game and in practice. He is coming into these last 2 games of the year raw. It's like we're starting the season over again. And we saw that last week where it took him a while to develop, to get himself into the flow of the game. And now we're seeing it this week where he's continued to make beginning of year mistakes because for him, it is the beginning of the year again. So Boise State right now, their best chance to win is with Taylor Green. Obviously, there's no one else on the roster that can do it. But for the fan base, I just wanted to caution you to put that out there that maybe hold back on some of those, get rid of him, he's the problem, all these issues. Because while he has things he can improve on and work on, he's also doing some things well. He had some great passes in this game. I don't want his mistakes to overshadow that. And at the same time, it's not entirely his fault that this has happened to him. And it's to be expected at this point based on how the season has progressed. So highlighting some great points for him, like I said, really some great throws to the tight ends. And Boise State really doing a focused job of, after a mistake by Taylor Green, actually putting him in a situation to succeed. You know, what I was talking about, they haven't done this whole year, allowing him to work through his mistakes and showing trust and confidence in him. Well, they did that this game. They are finally doing that. Bush Hamden's finally doing that. So we're going to see improvements to Taylor Green. He throws a pick. They come out the next play. They throw a pass, I believe, to the tight end, to Smith. He throws a second pick. They come out the next play. I believe, again, it was another pass, this time to Louder. Really working on trying to hone his skills and help him develop his confidence and get over those mistakes. Single play, compartmentalized mentality, next play up, moving forward with the drive. So overall for Taylor Green, yes, 2 big interceptions. He also had some nice throws, 228 yards passing. I wouldn't put too much stock in the overall yardage because 75 of those yards came on what was basically a run by Ashton Jeanty, short screen pass to him, and he ends up putting up 75 yards for a touchdown. So really, you're only looking at about, 153 yards of offense by Taylor Green passing. But overall, he had some really nice throws as well. I do see improvement for him, even if we're continuing to see some of those same old mistakes. So overall for Boise State, this offensive system really working much better with Bush Hamden fully in control, nobody over his shoulder. On the sideline, when things aren't going well, you see Spencer Danielson, he's talking to the defense. He's letting Bush Hamden work with his offense. Now he's also motivating, rallying the team. We saw that over the fourth quarter. Spencer Danielson doing a really great job of managing this team and keeping them passionate and riling and getting them fired up to go back out on the field. But he's focused on fixing the defense. He's letting Bush Hamden handle the offense, and we've seen 2 incredible offensive performances by Boise State in back-to-back games, and that is no coincidence now that Bush Hamden has full control of this offense. So overall for Boise State, great job on offense. Couple mistakes that allowed Air Force to stay in this game. This game should have been a blowout win. I mean, early on, you know that I was predicting a close game. If you watch my game preview, I was saying this game is going to be 27-24, win by a field goal. And early on, I said, wow, I'm going to be dead wrong. I'm pumped about it. This is going to be like a 3 or 4 touchdown win by Boise State. Air Force has nothing to offer in this. All the momentum is taken out. The defense is playing really well. The offense is blowing them out. They're about to score again. You know, there's nothing that's going to happen. And then Boise State started making mistakes. And so those mistakes allowed Air Force to keep this game close, allowed my score prediction to be pretty much spot on. The final score was 27-19. So I got the offensive score for Boise State right, and I was only 5 points off of the defensive score. But it shouldn't have been that way. It should have been a much bigger blowout. It was close for the reasons I did not expect it to be. That being that Boise State was making mistakes, Air Force did not bring their A game to this one. They did not perform well in this matchup, and Boise State allowed this game to be closer than it is. So you take away, really, those two big mistakes by Taylor Green, because both of those mistakes led to momentum and offensive swings by Air Force. The first interception, Boise State did manage to stop them and force a punt, but it allowed their offense to get into a groove, and you saw a change in the dynamic and the focus, the mentality of Air Force coming the rest of the game. And then the second pick actually ended up in a touchdown for Air Force. So there was two big momentum swings that if you take those out, Air Force has probably ran out of the stadium by the third quarter. So those two mistakes by Boise State allowed Air Force to stay in this game. So overall, for offensive performance, I'm going to give them a B+. Great offensive performance against a strong defense, one of the best defenses statistically in the country, one of the best defenses in the Mountain West. Obviously, that goes without saying if they're best, one of the best in the country, but they performed exceptionally well. 409 yards of offense versus an Air Force team when you are taking into the fact that your offense isn't supposed to have the ball for long periods of time because Air Force is supposed to run the clock down with their offense. Boise State's defense continually giving the ball back to the offense through forced punts or through turnover. I don't believe there was any turnovers, but one pick at the end, but through forcing punts and forcing drives to stop. But also your offense, on the other hand, going up against a strong, stout defense and performing well. Complete factors together, this offense did a great job. Interceptions will hurt their overall grade, but I was incredibly impressed, especially by the offensive scheme and the focus and the ability to execute that versus one of the best run-stopping offenses in the country. So overall, B+ performance for the offense. Looking at the defense, yeah, there were, when you talk about offensive defense and mistakes being made by both of them, but also incredible jobs performed by both these units. The defense, yes, a couple of mistakes given up, but overall, this was one of the best defensive performances I have seen versus Air Force in a long time. The only reason Air Force even had a chance, like I said, is because they were able to pick up some momentum from those turnovers by Boise State. Air Force comes out after an interception in the second half, throws a deep pass. Boise State had been shutting down the passing game all game. That interception, that momentum swing, allowed Air Force to do something that they wouldn't have probably been able to do otherwise. Overall, for Boise State, this offense for Air Force was putting up 282.1 yards rushing per game and 84.5 yards passing per game coming into this matchup. And Boise State held Air Force to 337 yards total and only 206 yards rushing. So almost 80 yards less than their season average. Now, yes, some passing yards given up, which that's not Boise State's strength, but against an option team that Boise State has always struggled against. They have always struggled against Air Force. Now, occasionally, see from time to time, they'll have some nice big wins versus them, but those are very far and few between. Boise State has consistently struggled against Air Force, but they came out and they established themselves defensively. They showed that while they weren't going to stop Air Force every time, and that's not to be expected, they showed that they were up to the task with that first drive. That first drive set the tone for the entire game. When Boise State came out with that first drive versus Air Force defensively, I knew this was going to be a win for them because they came out and they shut them down. Air Force tried a QB dive that was shut down for 1 or half a yard. They stopped a halfback pitch, and then they stopped the quarterback passing game. Ahmad Hassan had his 12th sack. One of the best defensive starts I've ever seen versus Air Force. Usually it takes Boise State a little while to kind of get into the feel of the game. A lot of going up against Air Force is eye discipline. It's not a defense you're used to facing, so it takes a little while to figure out. That did not happen in this one. Boise State was prepared. Spencer Danielson had this team prepared. Regardless of what you think of him, he is an exceptional defensive coordinator. So whether he becomes head coach or not, I hope that he continues to have a role in this defense. If someone else comes in, they need to keep him, and I believe that they will keep him on the staff because he is an amazing defensive coordinator. He had this team better prepared than I've seen any Boise State defense ever come in prepared versus an Air Force offense. Incredible first drive. Yes, a little bit of a momentum give up after the interception, but they stopped him. They went from the 10 to the 50-yard line, 55-yard line, and then they stopped them. What I said with Boise State in my keys to the game for this one is that you need to scheme for the big play. You need to understand that Air Force is going to give yards up against, you're going to give up yards against Air Force. They're going to put up yards on you. That's okay. Scheme for the big play. Find ways to get that tackle for a loss, to force that fumble, to get that pick. Find ways to put Air Force in a position where they're not setting up for a 3rd and short. And Boise State did that. They did not panic. They did not get out of their normal scheme. They didn't allow Air Force to disrupt them. Even after a momentum shift like that, and they're picking up yards, and you can't seem to stop them, they did not panic. And eventually, Air Force made a mistake. Eventually, Air Force made a better play Boise State made a better play than Air Force did, and got them in negative yardage. And once they were in negative yardage, it's a snowball downhill, because Air Force is not designed as an offensive system to come out of negative yardage plays. They are set up over at least 2 to 3 yards on every play minimum to set you up for the next one. If you end up losing yards, they're not set up schematically to be able to come back out of that. And Boise State's defense did an incredible job, not just of making big plays, but not allowing the snowball effect to push them off of their game. The Boise State's defense, there were some great individual efforts. Simpson had a huge sack from the backside on Britton. The sacks overall and the tackles for loss were incredibly impressive versus Air Force. 3 sacks, which again, a team that doesn't throw the ball very much, you get 3 sacks is impressive. And 5 tackles for loss. And again, this is an Air Force team that gives you so much to look at, and they're coming off the line fast at you. It's hard to get, a couple of tackles for loss. And Boise State put up 5 tackles for loss versus team, showing that they, again, were scheming to make that big impact play. They continued the defensive press that we saw from last week. Obviously, a little bit different focus going against the option, but we saw the defensive performance from last week, which was one of the statistically best defensive performances by a Boise State team ever in school history. Sack yardage, sacks overall it was, for sure, and just overall, I think it was an incredible performance. 4 turnovers, 9 sacks. They continued that momentum into this game. Again, showing the fact that Spencer Danielson, without anybody over his shoulder, is performing much better as a coach defensively for Boise State as well. Tubner really, really impressed me in this game. Obviously, he's been part of a secondary that has not been elite this season, to say the least. And yeah, versus Air Force, which is not a passing team, less than 100 yards passing, they still gave up 131 yards passing. So they're still struggling against stopping that overall. But Tubner is designed to stop the option. That's what he does. He has been a very sure tackler for Boise State all season. Again, while he and several other players in this roster have not been great against stopping the pass, what they have been doing an incredible job against is working with a defense that puts pressure on the quarterback, limits their opportunities to throw, and then comes down and makes the needed tackle. He was instrumental in this win for Boise State today. 14 tackles on a pass defended. So pass defended, he's still doing the coverage side of things, but 14 tackles. He was all over the field. He was running down from the backside. He had an incredible game. And like I said, while this was a great redemption moment for this team overall to come up and get a win versus Air Force, a team that was supposed to beat you, that nobody gave you a shot, fires the head coach, so much turmoil, and to come and end the season this way. What a way to end a season. I don't think I've ever been more excited about a 7-5 finish for a Boise State team. The future, it doesn't feel like a 7-5 season right now. The way that Boise State is trending, it feels like we're headed to a Fiesta Bowl. Obviously, we're not. But that's the kind of energy that's going on the sidelines right now. It's completely shifted. The one negative drawback to this team, it wasn't the roster. That was not the issue. It wasn't the assistant coaches. Unfortunately, identified it in the Memphis game that the problem was Andy Avalos. Once that problem was removed, Boise State has been a completely different team. So to have this redemption moment for Boise State overall, to end the season on the right way, to get to 7-5, to put themselves almost certainly in the Mountain West Championship game. Now there's a UNLV versus San Jose State game going on today, and hopefully, if this video comes out before that video does, and you're having trouble finding it, it's on the Mountain West Network, so you should be able to watch the game live on there. It's also live on Fubio TV. No idea why it's not televised. Should be. It's a major game, but it's on the Mountain West Network if you want to watch it there. So obviously there is some computer metrics that Boise State's got to go up against, and you never know what's going to happen with those. And Boise State could potentially still end up outside the Mountain West Championship game. If San Jose State goes in and wins by like 70 points, I'm not sure exactly what's going to be factored into those computer rankings, but there's a chance Boise State could still end up looking outside. But 90+% probability this win has put them in the Mountain West Championship game. And what an incredible, like I said, redemption moment for this team, but also a redemption moment for some of these players that have not had what you would say the best perfect season overall. And Tubner's definitely in that class where he has struggled with a secondary that has struggled overall to stop the defense, to stop the pass. But he comes up and he has a huge game like this, 14 tackles, a leader on this team, part of the leadership in the locker room that has turned this team around the last couple of weeks. To come in and have a huge game like that, you love to see it. And it wasn't just him. I'll skip ahead here because we're on this topic. Kanohi Kaniho. has really, really struggled this season defensively. That really goes without saying. I mean, I believe at one point he lost his starting job. He really has struggled versus the secondary. He's been pretty good in the stopping the tackling in the open space, but he has definitely struggled to stop the pass. He comes up with the game-sealing interception, his first interception of the entire season. Amazing things can happen for a roster when the right people are in charge, when the right people are motivating the team, when the right people are in place to give your program, your players, the best opportunity to succeed. And that is what we're seeing in this team right now. Players that haven't had necessarily the best season are coming up and having a huge impact to end the year. And it makes you wonder, does make you wonder what the results of this season would have been if other factors hadn't gotten in the way. But I loved seeing this defensive performance, playing so strong, performing so well individually and as a team overall. Again, holding Air Force to only 206 yards rushing, 19 points overall, despite 2 turnovers by Boise State, stopping the momentum, forcing a punt on 1 pick, allowing a touchdown on 1, but stopping the 2-point conversion. I mean, that was another thing about Boise State, not allowing themselves to get worn down, to get snowballed on, to go up and make the big play. They allow the touchdown. Okay, move on. They then go and they stop the 2-point conversion. They allow themselves to pick up some momentum. Bad decision by Air Force to go for that in that case. If they hadn't, they would have only been down by a touchdown at the end. So it allowed Boise State to pick up some momentum. It didn't really give Air Force anything. Obviously, it didn't give them anything with no points, but even if they made it, wouldn't really have given them anything. But Boise State having that performance, they give up plays at 6th drive of the game, the second to last drive of the game. They're giving up passes. They allow a 3rd down conversion on a pass. They allow another mid-range pass. But then Myron McCoy comes up with a 4th down stop in coverage. Boise State playing in a way that shows that the coaching staff has properly prepared them. They knew what was going to happen. They knew that mistakes were going to be made. They knew that Air Force was going to pick up yards, but they were okay with that because they knew that they would have an opportunity to come out the next play and make up for it, and that's what we saw in this game overall. So for Boise State, going to give them a solid A performance defensively. Couple of touchdowns, couple long runs, long 68-yard play to open up the game, open up the second half. There were some mistakes here and there, but overall for Boise State in this game, incredible performance. Special teams for Boise State, Jonah Dalmez, 2 of 2, long of 52. Some key field goals, a game that Boise State only ended up winning by 8 points. You take away those 6 points and Air Force only within a field goal. Maybe they play a little bit differently to go down and have a chance to win by 1. Doesn't happen because Jonah Dalmez is exceptional, continues to perform exceptionally in one of the best seasons I've ever seen by a Boise State kicker that is setting himself up for an NFL future, long of 52. James Ferguson Reynolds, you're talking about one of the best seasons that you've ever seen by a Boise State player, period. James Ferguson Reynolds continues his career, statistically record-breaking performance for Boise State with another 50-plus yard average, 3 punts for 53.7 yards, which included a long of 71. Do you know what it does for a team when you have a punter like James Ferguson Reynolds on your roster? When you are able to win the field position battle, no matter what your offense does, it takes that entire element completely out of the game plan. You don't have to worry about playing conservative and trying to pick up an extra 5 or 10 yards here or there so that you can think about punting. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're at your 10-yard line or if you're at your 45-yard line when you punt. Because odds are James Ferguson Reynolds is going to put it on the opponent's 20 or less, inside their 10, no matter where you are on the field. That is an incredible asset to have because it gives you so much freedom to do what your offense does naturally without having to think of the outside field position game battle. It's taken completely out of your hands. You've already won the field. You have won the field position game battle from the moment that you step on the field offensively because no matter where you have to punt, James Ferguson Reynolds is going to get that ball deep into the opponent's end zone, deep in the opponent's side of the field. Incredible performance, long of 71. Would have had another punt down inside the 1 if the the coverage team had been able to get down on it. Just missed it. And then with Air Force bringing an all-out punt block, he still gets a 44-yard punt off. So The 44-yard punt, the one that rolls in the end zone, takes down his average a little bit from, averaging like 60 or something on the game. But an incredible performance by James Ferguson Reynolds, who continues to be one of the brightest lights on this team, on this roster. Otherwise, for Boise State, the great punt return and kick return coverage, something that they have struggled at the latter end of the season. Obviously, big kick return allowed versus Fresno State, some long punt returns allowed versus Utah State. Today, we didn't see that. They fixed that. Only a 2-yard punt return by Air Force, only 18-yard kick return. Where Boise State still struggles is not having a return team, a return option in their own right. Punt return overall, there wasn't really any opportunities. Joe Trelawney was out there, but the Air Force was on him by the time he caught the ball. Kick return-wise, I was really surprised. I believe they had Cole Wright out there returning the kicks, and there were several times where he caught the ball, and there was not anybody close to him for 15 yards or so. And it wasn't like he was in his end zone most of the time. Most times at like the 7 to 10. You're probably going to get to at least the 20, 25, maybe more. I don't understand why Boise State's not running in that situation. It's not like they've had ball security issues in special teams overall. They've not had a bunch of fumbles in the kick return. I don't think that Cole Wright is capable of returning the ball. I was surprised by Boise State's decision pretty much every time, actually not pretty much, every single time, to just call a fair catch. I think that was a mistake, but didn't end up making a huge impact overall on this game. So real quick here, keys to the game for Boise State, grading them. And then we'll talk about what this win means for Spencer Danielson and for the team moving forward. Beat Air Force at their own game. Run heavy option. Use your strength. Even if it goes up against Air Force's strength, that is the way you're going to win this game. It's not going to be by coming out pass heavy because your offense isn't designed for it and your defense is going to be tired. They didn't fall into that trap. They didn't fall into the Washington trap. They came out and they performed to their strength. A-plus performance. Scheme for the big plays. You've heard me talk about it over and over again in this video. Incredible defensive performance. Solid A effort by them on that. Not a ton of turnovers forced. I mean, Braxton Freely had I forgot to mention him, incredible, coming off of last week where really he had a breakthrough performance for Boise State. 2 forced fumbles, has another forced fumble this game. Braxton Freely really exerting himself as a number one threat for this defense in a defensive roster, especially defensive front 7, that has really come on strong the back end of this season. Return game, come alive. I just talked about it. That's an F overall. So, Spencer Danielson, should he be the head coach? This maybe should be a separate video, but I'm going to work it in here because it's on topic and part of this discussion. So, Spencer Danielson, should he be the head coach? Well, Boise State's won 2 games in a row, and we've seen a completely different output from this team. Completely different performance, completely different level of play from all sides. Offense, defense, even special teams, which wasn't really a problem point, but improvement in the coverage unit and the return unit overall. Slight, but there. Overall, Spencer Danielson's done an amazing job. He really has. And I do believe that he is going to be a great head coach for Boise State at some point in the future. But and I'm not hating on Spencer Danielson, but I do want to say this. This roster should not be 7-5. I've said it all season long, that this roster is too good to be performing record-wise this poorly. Yes, Washington would have been a loss. Really, you would have to go out and perform, 2007 Fiesta Bowl level to win against that team. It was probably not going to happen. It could have been closer. The result could have been closer than it was, but a loss was going to come whether Chris Peterson is at the helm or Andy Avalos. More than likely. Obviously, that is shot with Chris Peterson, but more than likely. So at least one loss on. But then you look at Colorado State. You look at Fresno State. You look at Memphis. You look at UCF. All of those games could have and should have been won by Boise State. And especially the Memphis game. UCF game was a little bit back and forth, but especially the Memphis game, that was the turning point. And that was where I said Andy Avalos needed to be fired because he lost that game for Boise State. My point is, this roster should have at least 10 wins. It's not been the roster's fault that Boise State is 7-5. Any competent coach could get this team to 10 wins or more. And Spencer Danielson is a more than competent coach. He is a solid, good coach. So of course this team is performing better. Of course they're performing well. That doesn't mean that Boise State's reached its maximum potential with this roster under Spencer Danielson. Now they might have. Who knows? There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of ambiguities. There's a lot of analysis, which I like to do the analysis part, and that's what my channel is based on. But while facts are a basis of analysis, a lot of it is projection and conjecture on top. So the facts that we have is that this team is 2-0 under Spencer Danielson, headed for a Mountain West Championship game more than likely, and a bowl game, and may end the season on a 4-0 run. But we also know that this roster is incredibly talented, and that Boise State in general, based on their level of recruiting compared to the rest of the Mountain West, compared to the rest of the Group of Five, the amount of economic input that comes into this team because of their raised profile, because of the blue turf and the Boise State name and everything that they've done and that they're capable of, because their increased TV numbers and the revenue that comes in from that. The argument could be made that any competent coach should be able to get this team to 9 or 10 wins every single season. It was a big negative, a big downside on I'm struggling for the word here, but a big mark against Andy Avalos that this team went 7-5, only barely got to 10 wins with Dirk Cutter stepping in last season, and was set up for 7-5 or less this year under his helm. And I do believe that if he was still with this team, Boise State would be looking at 6-6 or less. Probably more likely 5-7. Utah State is not a terrible team, and they, I think, could have had a chance of beating Boise State with Andy Avalos at the helm. So the point here is that, any good coach should get this win to get this team to 9 or 10 wins every season. They should be able to beat Air Forces of the world that are on their third string quarterback. They should be able to beat the Utah States of the world that end up on their third string quarterback, second string quarterback midway through the game, and third string quarterback by the end of the game. Boise State's beaten two teams now that have both been on their third string quarterback or less by the time the game has ended. So they haven't beaten a full roster yet. They should beat these teams. These are not world beaters. These are not teams that you don't expect Boise State to win against. Now, with Andy Avalos at the helm, everything was a question, so Boise State was not expected to win against these teams. But now that Boise State is back, that they've restored themselves, you expect them to win against these teams. So a good coach should get the team to 9 or 10 wins every year. A really good coach should get your team to playing in a conference championship or being in competition for it every single year. The Dan Hawkins, the Brian Harsons of the world should be able to take this team, this Boise State team, and get Boise State to 10 plus wins and in the running for just barely outside or just losing in the conference championship game. They should be one of the top 2 teams in the conference every single year. Maybe they won't be undefeated. Maybe we'll get a miracle season like 2003. Maybe you'll get a really, really solid year where you overcome things like 2014 and get to a Fiesta Bowl. But at the very minimum, you're going to get your team to a conference championship or being in contention for it. A great coach, an exceptional coach with this roster, because again, it's not a Power 5 roster. This isn't Bama. There are things that Group of 5 teams have to struggle against, and playing out of conference against Power 5 teams is something you're going to have to overcome. But a great exceptional coach should be able to take this roster, overcome those things, and have Boise State in the top 15 rankings, competing for Fiesta Bowls and beyond. And the exceptional coach in this case is Chris Peterson. So for Boise State, Spencer Danielson is a good coach. He may even be a great coach for Boise State. But he is, at the very least, a good coach, a very good coach for Boise State. But there are exceptional coaches out there. There are those options. There are those coaches that could take this roster and put them back in contention for the New Year's 6 games and playoffs, which is now what the new Group of 5 is going for. Could put them in the playoffs. Could put them back on Sports Illustrated. Could put them back at the top of the college football pyramid. There are those candidates out there. Kellen Moore, I believe, could do that. I think Ryan Dinwiddie is in that category. And then underneath that, there are proven, really good coaches that could also do that. Brian Harsin, I think, could come back and do what really good coaches do. Spencer Danielson is an unproven commodity. The players love him. He inspires them. He's passionate. He acts like a head coach. The more and more I watch him, the more excited and confident I am about him as a potential candidate. And he is a potential candidate for Boise State. But there are proven, with experience, very good options, and there are potential exceptional options out there. I don't think after a 2-game performance, I don't think after winning a Mountain West Championship game, I don't think after winning a bowl game, I don't think after finishing season 4-0, you should give up the chance for the exceptional option, if it's out there, to go for the unproven. 4 games is not proving anything. There are 4 games versus group of 5 programs who are, UNLV, is kind of a recent development, but not a proven one. Not top group of 5 programs, and then a mid to lower level Power 5 team in a bowl game. If you go 4-0, that's impressive, especially considering how Boise State started. And I'm not taking anything away from what Boise State could achieve, what Spencer Danielson has been able to achieve with this roster. And I think that if he is the one that's hired, I think he'll do a great job. I think, based on what we've seen so far, he should be a top candidate for this position. But I also think that the fan base needs to take a bigger picture perspective to this whole situation right now and look at what the potential could be. Kellen Moore is a long shot, but he's a potential candidate. Dinwiddie's a long shot, but he's a potential candidate. If the exceptional options say no, then you go down, or are taken off the table for whatever reason, then you go down to the very, very good options. And there are a lot of those out there as well. And below that, you have the good, or perhaps very good but unproven, and Spencer Danielson's in that third tier. But he may end up being the one you go with. I would not have anything against Spencer Danielson being picked over a more experienced, very good option, because I think he's trending towards being that very good option for Boise State. And over time, he may be the exceptional coach. Chris Peterson, the exceptional coach that I've presented as my, as the comparison here, said that he thinks that Spencer Danielson is going to be a great coach down the line. That is high praise from the greatest to ever do it at Boise State. So this is not a negative against Spencer Danielson. I am not saying he shouldn't be a candidate. I'm not saying he wouldn't do a good job with this roster. But I'm also saying we should look at the bigger picture overall and not jump to conclusions and decisions. And luckily, it's not in my court. It's not in the hands of Bronco Nation. It's not in the hands of the media. Luckily, this decision is with Jeremiah Dickey and his staff. And I believe that they will look at the bigger picture and take the best option out there. So I am incredibly confident in what Jeremiah Dickey and his staff are going to do. And I think the best thing that we can really do right now is to just support them in this search. But overall, Bronco Nation, Spencer Danielson is starting to get a lot of support. Former players coming out for him, the media coming out for him, the fan base overall, and for a good reason. He's earned that. He's earned that support. He's earned that praise. And regardless of whether or not he gets the job or not, that should not be taken as an assessment of his performance in the latter end of the season, because it has been exceptional and historic. What he's been able to do with this roster. Even if Boise State loses the Mountain West Championship game and loses the bowl game, I still think that what he's done the last 2 games here has proven that he is an exceptional coach with a bright future. And I would have the results the rest of the season takes nothing away from my assessment of what he is capable of doing, what he's been able to do this season, and the high praise that I have for him. So I have incredibly high praise for Spencer Danielson, and if he's picked by Jeremiah Dickey, I will be satisfied with that, completely satisfied with that, because he's definitely earned that look. But I did want to caution, because we as a fan base tend to get so caught up in the emotion. It happened with Andy Avalos. Lose a game, fan base starts to shift against him. Wins a game, fan base shifts back towards his corner. Back and forth, waves and waves, a tidal waves of emotion, and there's just no bigger picture in the fan base, and that's fine, because we're fans, right? That's our energy. We're energized by the moment. That's what a fan is. But we also have to be a little bit more analytical and look at the bigger picture overall. And right now, Spencer Danielson is riding a tidal wave that hopefully will carry Boise State to a Mountain West Championship game and a bowl game versus a Pac-12 opponent and a win. And a 4-0 and end the season. Get to 9 wins on a year when, my goodness, you were looking at not even getting bowl eligibility. And I'm so excited for the end of the season. But at the same time, I do want us to take a breather and look at the bigger picture overall. So I'll step off of my soapbox for the day. Thanks so much for watching. Again, apologize for this coming out a little bit late. Not being in my regular studio space, for maybe my voice being a little grainier than usual. But again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for being part of this. It's going to be an incredible end of the season. I can't believe that I am at a point that we as a fan base and a team are at a point where we're looking at a Mountain West Championship game as a real possibility based on how the first 10 out of the 12 games of the season went this year. The fact that we're sitting here right now is mind-blowing and part of what makes college football the greatest sport in the world. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, win or lose, regardless of results, regardless who ends up being the head coach for the Broncos, go Big Blue!